Good morning. I'd like to call the County Board of Supervisors to order on Tuesday, March 21st at approximately 10 a.m. Will you please join me for Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Come on.
Even.
Well, that's number 7.
It's not even beeping. Oh, you're okay.
The battery might be dead.
But it won't go past confirm.
Heard it. Got a low battery, I'll bet.
What about mine? I've been doing
Hold
it.
it up toward the,
It won't confirm.
now press the bottom. Is it
I've
beeping?
done it about 10 times.
Batteries.
I got a low battery.
Sure, you could guess something that's supposed to.
That's actually not surprising.
Who's gonna put a battery in it? It's broke.
You know, when even the batteries don't work, we're in
Jack of all trades, master.
I bet it's the battery.
There.
Perfect.
all right. Thank you, ma'am.
Work for me.
She's must have a little supply of batteries at her desk.
Too smart to do that.
I would never believe that.
Okay, so we have 20 present and 1 absent. Presentation of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have recognition for Mark Janiak. Mark?
Sure. Oh, wait, I got it.
Yeah, his microphone's
Oh.
turned.
Well, at least one of you can look down there.
Mr. Chairman, turn your microphone, there you go.
There you go. Actually, Howard, it's kind of funny. This is the first time I think we've ever seen him in a sweater and a shirt.
It's an imposter.
This is actually kind of funny. I love it. So again, obviously, you know, as Mark has retired from employment in Door County, and we have a plaque of recognition for 20 years of dedicated service. I believe he started in 1998, correct? And again, the recognition says, in recognition of over 20 years of your dedicated service to the people of Door County, in the Door County Finance Department, this is presented to Mark Janiak, this 26th day of March 2019. And I guess just for a little bit of fun, I thought I'd just tell maybe just one story about Mark. So I had the pleasure of working with Mark for only 4 years, but as you can imagine, with my relationship with finance, we work constantly together. And one of the things that when I first looked at taking the position, the finance director was vacant. And I was watching all the minutes, and they couldn't find a finance director. And all of a sudden, they hired Mark internally. I go, okay, I got to meet this individual. So I was going through the interview process. So the first one, I didn't get a chance to meet him. And then the second interview, I got through the process, and they introduced me to some of the department heads. So the first time I met Mark, I walked into his office, and I see all this bear stuff on the walls. And he's in a Hawaiian shirt. I'm going, oh, my God, what am I getting myself into with this guy? So, but what was really neat is, you know, during those 4 years, it was a pleasure to work with Mark, very dedicated to his work. He knew how to have fun, but also be fiscally responsible. A lot of the things that we've done for setting a new path within the past 4 years has been under the leadership and guidance of Mark. There's been times where Mark and I have disagreed, but we walked out of the room shaking hands, and we had a strategy moving forward, and I think that's one of the best things that you can have with someone that you can work with, is the ability to share ideas, challenge one another, and then move forward and try to accomplish new things. So with that, I'm very pleased and honored to present this plaque to Mark. And Mark, I wish you well in your retirement, and if you'd like to say something, please.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. 20 years sounds like a long time, but it seems like my time here at Door County passed in not much more than a few blinks of an eye. I had a lot of opportunity for professional growth and for advancement here at Door County, and for that, I'm very thankful. I'm also thankful for having had the opportunity to work with all of you and your predecessors, both on the county board level and as far as many of the oversight committees. So with that, I'll say thank you for the opportunities, thank you for your support, and thank you for this recognition. Thank you.
You should keep that on.
I should keep it on for the tone of the meeting.
It is impressive. Most people get less cash. More.
Correspondence. In your packet, you'll find the unassigned fund balance information, a letter from U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, a letter from Don Fricks. There's also been a number of letters that were passed out you should have on your desk. There's 5 or 6 letters here, mostly all of them relating to the transportation issue, which we will be touching on. Public comment. I'll open it up for public comment. If you are here for transportation, please hold your public comment. When we get to that item, we will have the public comment at that time. Okay? Please be limited to 3 minutes, and we have 30 minutes available for public comment this morning.
Thank you and good morning. Don Fricks, Fish Creek, Wisconsin. Addressing my letter that you published in the correspondence, as a board, as public, we've enacted zero tolerance policies along with extending the reach of criminal law enforcement to police civil behavior and force social conformity in our schools. How then is it acceptable for this governing body to neglect enacting stricter zero tolerance policies for the adults who should understand what better behavior is and who should set an example for the rest of our citizens? Please go forth and enact an enforceable code of public conduct, and an enforceable ethics policy with clear consequences for county board supervisors, along with clear procedures allowing citizens to bring forth their concerns. I have a comment on transportation needs. I hope I get back to that. Sadly, I'll have to conclude that the appointment of the chair for the county legislative committee appears intended to eliminate all potential discussion and criticism of our unconstitutionally gerrymandered GOP-dominated state legislature. There aren't any meetings being held. Public safety announcement, Ready, Wisconsin, on the front page of the county website warns of attackers possibility stealing your passwords on the Ready Wisconsin link. And a question about, this relates to EMS services. A Canadian subsidiary of an international personal data aggregator appears to have unrestricted selling of personal data for the code red and OnSolve thing on the front page. And the county is paying for the service. So if you read the fine print, it appears that the data that we're encouraging people to provide and subscribe to can be used and resold by the international corporation of the Canadian subsidiary that we're paying money to. So I don't know if the service is needed. And this small instance illustrating the privatization of an emergency service should be a wake-up call to the county board about what happens when EMS service is privatized without fully examining questionably unneeded and poor service delivered at unnecessary and easily avoidable higher costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning. Ethics, sadly, a returning
Would you please
topic here.
state your name?
Robert Cyrus, Forestville. Ethics, sadly a returning topic here. We all have our differences and that can be a good thing. However, the key is how do we deal with it? We live in an increasingly intolerant world. Some of you might think, yeah, I heard that before. The question then is, why do you think you have a code of ethics or core values covering, I assume proudly, the front of your webpage? And I partially quote here from your mission statement, deliver all county services and programs in a respectful, professional manner. Your vision statement, we are a government that listens to people. Your core value statement, respect, treat all people as you would like to be treated. Responsiveness to people, be user-friendly. Your integrity statement, ensure public trust through honesty, consistency, and follow-through. Your openness and accessibility statement. People should feel they can approach and communicate freely with their county government. Door County officials, these are your core values. Are these only empty words or are they meaningful to each of you? Where the rubber really meets the road is how these core values are reflected in your conduct. You as a governing body can set the tone for those, and it is your duty to set the tone as a member. So it is up to each of you, Door County official, whether you honor these values or do you let it become a joke. And one more thing here is to show something about your core values. More than 4 months ago, in the Forestville Dam inspection report, it was flagged that for people operating the valve was a hazardous situation. And I went to the dam yesterday, so that 4 months later, nothing has been done yet. So this is to show what your core value is. Are your employee safety, are they important to you or not? And I must say, do the words liability mean anything to you? If anything happens there, OSHA will come hard on you because this is a clear safety violation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Vicki from Joliet Avenue. I just want to say that I think door-to-door should still be funded because a lot of people depend on it.
Okay, thank you. Again, if you have comments about the transportation issue, we're going to handle public comments separately for that.
Oh, okay.
No problem. It's okay.
Terry McNulty, 300 East Park Street, Forestville.
Good morning.
And I'm here again to inform you, Mr. Chairman and the board, that you should be embarrassed by one of your committee heads ignorantly going out to a neighboring county and attacking myself and another elected official. He was talking completely emptiness. He didn't talk to anybody that he referred to. I don't know if you know what happened is your Soil and Water Department went to sell their plan to Kewaunee County. Now, if all the questions have been answered, that wouldn't be necessary. I expect action from this board, or we'll have to take the action sooner than later. You know, I also don't normally agree with the Door County Environmental Council, but they recently made a statement that they are also against this drawdown. You know, I'm just wondering, when is Southern Door going to get their fair share? And what is it going to take? Another little thing that happened in the recent, since your bad decision, is a property down there by Mill Pond sold. It was assessed at $60,100. It got an accepted offer price of $35,000. That's 58% value of those properties. There's 40 more properties down there yet. In the town of Forestville and Door County, you're going to feel that impact of that bad decision.
Thank you. Anybody else? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Laura Jorgensen from Forestville. I'm also a trustee on the Village of Forestville Board. In response to the correspondence by Don Fricks and also Terry McNulty, who just spoke, I want to read to you something. It's the pledge from the Door County Civility Project. We build a stronger and more diverse community by actively sharing our ideas and opinions with others in thoughtful and considerate ways. By practicing this basic commitment to civility, we learn and grow from one another, even in disagreement. I've signed this pledge, and I take it very seriously in my personal interactions and in my professional work. This work includes speaking at public meetings on behalf of several local environmental groups, as an elected official for the Village of Forestville, and as well as a village representative during the Mill Pond Stakeholders Committee meetings. In the past few months, I've experienced repeated displays of public disrespect by one of the county board supervisors, who is also the LCC committee chairman, Mr. Fisher. He has instructed me as to what I am allowed to speak about during public comment, as well as inaccurately quoting me, to which I have not been allowed to respond. At the latest Kewanee Land Conservation meeting, I spoke on behalf of the Village of Forestville in opposition of the Mill Pond drawdown. Mr. Fisher, who was also speaking on behalf of the Door County Board of Supervisors, took his time during this public comment time to dismiss and discredit the health and safety concerns of the citizens in our municipality. And he told the Land Conservation Board, Kewanee County Land Conservation Board, Ms. Jorgensen has an agenda. While Mr. Fisher and I disagree on many things, there's one thing that we can respectfully agree on. I absolutely do have an agenda. My agenda is clear and concise. It's to protect the health and safety of the citizens who I represent in my municipality. As a citizen, as well as an elected official, I feel it's necessary that the Door County Board of Supervisors review this matter and act appropriately. I also encourage all of the board members to sign this civility pledge, if you have not already, and practice it in their own work and their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? We'll now close the public comment. Thank you. Supervisor's response, if any. Approval of the minutes of the February 26, 2019 regular meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Any changes, additions, deletions, comments? Susan?
Under the discussion of the LaSalle Pavilion, I just wonder if we want to add to that it will be 50% funded by the Friends of the Door County Parks. We had done that in another one about the hitting property, and since it isn't fully on the taxpayer levy, perhaps we ought to note that.
Okay. Anybody else? All in favor of the amendment, of the amended minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Pending business and updates. Resolution 20-1922, appointment to the position of Poet Laureate.
I'll make a motion to approve. What's going on here? I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-22, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank you.
I believe they're here, if they would like to come up, please.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Sharon Auberly, and I'm the outgoing Poet Laureate for the last 2 years. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to have this good experience, which I hope was also helpful in establishing appreciation for poetry and the arts, and turn over the reins to Nancy Rafal, who is also a fine poet, a familiar face, and an ardent supporter of all the arts in Door County. And I think she'll do a great job. Nancy?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, board, and thank you, people I haven't met yet. And I'd like to read one poem, but before that, I went, this position has been in effect for more than 10 years, and Frances May was appointed posthumously as the first Poet Laureate of Door County. And at that time, Warren Bloom, in his column in The Advocate, made this statement: Door County is a poem. And I believe in recycling, so this is a poem that I had written a while back, actually right after the 4-lane was completed to Green Bay. Angling up the peninsula. Rock cut for new highway is naked of knapweed this first season. Road no longer bends around Namur. New road signs point the way to Old Marker, lest we forget Booyah and Belgian pies. The Brussels Hills presents a new face, pockmarked with turkeys. Swayback log buildings pull our vision beyond twin strips of concrete. Red brick and cream call out Brussels and clay banks. No railroad tracks along the Anapee. A hiking trail now oversees the bog. Past the city, along the quiet side, skeletons of dead barns stare blindly. Just before Mr. G's, a little 3-bay, someone took the effort to roof with metal. Further north, 4 square farmhouses, updated, standing proud. Find a side road before Jacksonport and venture toward the lake. New homes for pensioners, some in scale with their surroundings, some not. Keep going through Bailey's with that Got Everything hardware store and Toff family legacy. Northward past the farms where Wallace and Hazel guaranteed live arrival. Postcard views of Sister Bay may get you goat. Ellison Bay holds tales of pioneer rebuilding. Beyond Newport, the twisted Jensen Road. Gills Rock, gateway to Washington, Detroit, and Rock Island, evidence of glacial recession. Prepare to angle down, perhaps along the bay, and woven through it all, acres and acres of questral land locked in preservation to be enjoyed beyond the 7th generation. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We are going to deviate from our agenda, and we're going to move down to the transportation
Do the
special report.
do the CJCC first. Do the judge first.
I'm sorry,
Do the judge first.
Yeah.
we're going to do the treatment court first. This being an informational report, Door County Circuit Court, Treatment Court, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and other matters by the Honorable David L. Weber.
Good morning.
Morning.
Most of you know me. I'm David Weber, Circuit Court Judge in Branch 2. I came before you about a year ago, I think, to establish a CJCC, a Criminal Justice Collaborating Council, and I wanted to just update you as to some of the things that we've done. We have met many times in that last year, probably 5 or 6 times in all, but the main thing that we've done is we've established a work group to look into the efficacy and the ability for us to set up a treatment court. And we've had many meetings to do that, and the actual work group consists of myself, the District Attorney Colleen Nordine, Sheriff Tammy Sternard, Tara Tesh, who is from the Public Defender's Office, Joe Krebsbach, and Donna from the Department of Human Services has been very involved. We've had many meetings with Ken as well regarding some financing issues. So we've probably had 10 or 20 meetings concerning looking at all aspects of the treatment court. And I've literally spent hours and hours and hours. I think there's not a week that's gone by that I haven't done something, either talking to other judges that have treatment courts, going to visit treatment courts. Several of our group have gone down twice to Green Bay to look at the treatment courts there. So what I want you to understand is that this isn't something that is my brainchild. It's not something that, I kind of worked out. We have a group of people, the district attorney, the sheriff, myself, and various other people who believe that this is something that we should really be seriously looking at and trying to get established. What is a treatment court? I know you have a very busy agenda, so I don't want to go on too long about this issue, but a treatment court is simply an extension of the circuit court. It's a mechanism to give people who are addicted to drugs or have a mental illness high supervision, more supervision than they can get on probation. And by giving them this type of supervision, daily communications with the coordinator, daily testing, urinalysis, constant supervision with treatment and employment. They're out in the society working. By giving them this, and then they have to come in front of the court depending on the phase that they're in, but as often as once a week, and answer to the court as to how they're doing. This is a sort of model that's been set up, and by giving them this high supervision, we can break the cycle that they're in. Because right now, without the treatment court, when these folks, they're put on probation and they get revoked, there's only one thing that Judge Ehlers and I can do. We can send them back to jail or prison. That's the only thing that we can do. And the evidence shows us that doing that is not a very good thing. I mean, it might protect society for a short period of time, but these people are not having their underlying problems addressed. So the treatment court is a way to allow us to give, or at least attempt to give these people treatment and supervision that's going to break the cycle that they're in. What is a treatment court not? It is not a diversion program. Some people think that, oh, you're just being soft on crime here. Everybody that's in the treatment court has to plead guilty or no contest to an offense. This is not a way for them to get out of penalty or any sort of consequences for their crime. They have to plead out, as I said. Everybody that's been involved in treatment understands that a fundamental thing about it, in order for it to work, is that they have to take accountability for what they've done. So it is not a diversion program in any way, shape, or form. It is not for violent people. There are no violent people, in other words, who have committed some sort of violent crime, gets in the treatment court. It is not for sex offenders. It is for people that have a high level of addiction or mental illness or both. And we, of course, as a team have to decide who's going to get in. But I want to be clear about that. It is not a panacea. It is one more tool that we want in our justice system, or we think is necessary in our justice system, to address the multifaceted problems that we face. It's not for everybody, and it doesn't work for everybody. But the studies show that it's working for a lot of people. There are 86 treatment courts in Wisconsin right now, and the number is growing all the time. To my knowledge, none of them have gone defunct or gone out of business. In fact, everything we hear is there's more treatment courts all the time. And the group of people that I just talked about, we think that it's time for this to happen in Door County. One of the things that our group did is we worked very hard last fall on an application to the National Drug Court Association for training. We worked for several months on this application, and I'm happy to tell you that it was granted. So the people from the National Drug Court Association are coming out from the East Coast to give us training in April. It's April 24th, 25th, and 26th. It's at Stone Harbor because they didn't want us to be at the Justice Center. They didn't want us to be distracted by the press of business. So we're literally going to get intensive training for the treatment court. All the members of our team, myself, the district attorney, the defense attorney, the treatment providers, the coordinator that we've designated are all going to be there, and they're going to give us this treatment. And I welcome anybody here, anybody at all, even members from the public, to come and witness any part of the training. If you want to learn more about the treatment court, it would be an excellent way for you to do that. You're welcome to come. Obviously, you don't have to stay all 3 days, but you're welcome to come at any time. We've been, as I say, meeting with Ken. We've had several meetings with Ken to talk about funding for this. One of the beautiful things about the training, is that it will make us eligible for federal funding. The same folks that give us the training are the ones that give out the federal funding. So we're hoping that after we do this training, it's going to make us eligible for a federal grant that we're going to apply for in approximately 1 year. In 2021, something known as a TAD grant, that's a state court grant, it stands for Treatment Alternatives and Diversion, is going to be available. We're told that if we apply for that grant, we will get it. But that is a state court grant, but it's not available until 2021, and it's a 5-year grant. Many of the treatment courts in Wisconsin are funded by the TAD grant, but it only runs at certain times. So our goal right now is to set up a pilot program, a limited program, maybe have 5 participants, to get us through approximately 1 year. After a year, we're going to hopefully get our federal grant to help us, and then we'll be eligible for the TAD grant. So that's in a nutshell where we are on the funding part of this. But in short, we're making strides about the treatment court. Very excited about it. It's something that I've worked on very hard. Not just me, though. A lot of other people have worked very hard on it as well and have given us a lot of input. Ken thought it would be a good idea if I distinguish some of the other initiatives in Door County. One is that you might have heard of is Operation Fresh Start. And maybe some of you are confused, is there overlap? Operation Fresh Start is really a program that was started by our now Sheriff, Tammy Sternard. It's a program for people who are jailed, who are in the Door County Jail and who will be there for at least 60 days. And they're Door County residents. And it's a program to give them certain skills while they're in jail, to expose them to certain modules. There's like 7 modules: education, housing, finance, community service, treatment on a limited basis. And if they do these modules, they can get credit off of their sentence. The idea is that when they get out of jail, they will have more skills to help them re-enter the community. Tammy, as I said, even though Judge Ehlers and I signed an order implementing this program in June of 17, she's really the one that got this program up and running, and it's working well. So there's a lot of these people that are sitting in jail, they don't know how to balance their checkbook, they don't know how to spend their money. This is a way for them to get that kind of education before they dismissed from their jail sentence. We also have something called Pathways of Door County. This is a diversion program. This was started by Tammy also. She applied for and got a grant of about $80,000, most of which is being paid to pay the coordinator of this program, Kelsey Christensen. I don't know if any of you have met Kelsey. She's a great young resource that's working this program. But this is a diversion program. This is for very low-level offenders, people who commit a very low-level offense. And the idea is rather than saddle them with a criminal offense when they're 18 or 20 years old, they can do certain things, take training, do community service or whatever, and move on a one-time basis. So that is a diversion program that's up and running as well. So those two programs, Operation Fresh Start and Pathways of Door County, are programs that are up and running right now. And we're hoping that the third element will be the treatment court. And again, we're getting our training. I hope to come back in the next several months to tell you how that training went and where specifically I think we're going to need to go from there. Beyond that, I just want to tell you that things are going very well in the circuit court system in Door County. The judges, Judge Ehlers and I get along very well. We communicate very well with each other, and we have a great working relationship. We are reminded all the time when we go to seminars how blessed we are in Door County. We have a Justice Center that is second to none. We hear judges talk about security all the time at these seminars. We, of course, have no concerns about things like that. We have a great location for our Justice Center. It's not downtown. We can get there. People can get there. People can park there. The resources there in terms of the audio-visual, the technology is second to none. So I commend all of you again, those of you who were responsible for that. It really is a special place, and we're very fortunate to have it, and we know it. So did anybody have any questions for me? All right, I hope to come back in several months, give you an update. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll have a presentation on Door County Transportation Program with Joe Krebsbach and Ken Potter.
Sure, so while Joe comes up and sets up, let me just give you some context. If you recall, last year we requested some additional funding to do a study of our program to figure out how we can make it more efficient and viable. And I guess today is the accumulation of that work. And let me just give you some context. We're not looking for a decision today. Maybe there's some guidance on some direction, but again, our goal today is to, I guess, present some of those findings and what we're trying to accomplish. Then, based off of that, we'd come back in April as far as a more, I guess, solidified plan in terms of how we move forward. And then we'd actually, in terms of moving forward, we need to have a decision. We actually have to have it go for a public hearing. So it's a 30-day window. So we formally would not make a formal decision until May. But again, this is just to give you context of the process we got to go through. So today is just the start of having these discussions and looking for some of your feedback. So with that, I'll have Joe start the presentation for us, and we'll go from there. Maybe Grant, could you grab the lights?
Sorry, folks.
It's great.
Let's move on.
All right, well, this worked yesterday when we tried it out. Let me try one more time here, Joe. No, well, hang on.
No, that's good. It's there. You just got to open your presentation.
Well, my presentation's open on my computer, so. All right, Jill, can you find it? It's on the public drive. So I did create a backup for this, just in case it didn't work today. But I swear, Jill and I came down and checked it out yesterday, and we were good to go.
Up, Joe.
All right, so do we have something here to move it?
Do you have the
Yep. Just hit the button.
back and,
Next.
yep.
There we go. All right. Sorry for the delay. So I put a presentation together today to try and give you not just where we're at, but kind of how we got here. So I have some background information about public transportation, how our system works. Overall, there's a lot of components to this. There's a lot of fiscal pieces to it. And obviously, we're here because we have some issues and we have some concerns in terms of where we're at right now. And we're kind of at a critical decision-making point for our program. So let's see if I can get both of these to work together. Well, that one's working. All right. So just to give you some history, public transportation didn't exist in Door County before 2010. Now, we did have transportation services. We had the senior center bus, which we were operating. I honestly can't tell you how long that program has been going. I started here 25 years ago, and it was in place at that point. So we've been running the senior center bus for a long time. Sunshine House, I'll come back to the funding, but the senior center bus is provided. We're running that through some state levy and some local tax levy. We have some matching funds that we have to do to get the state money. Sunshine House was also providing services prior to the start of public transportation. I did not research or ask Cindy about this, so this is off of my understanding, but they're receiving, prior to that, 5310 money, which helped them purchase vehicles. They also had some donations, and we bought services from them through the Department of Community Programs to move people with some of the grant money that we had. Red Cross was also available back at that time, and DoorTran was established by 2010. DoorTran and Door-to-Door often get confused, but they're different entities. DoorTran is a nonprofit, and that nonprofit provides mobility management. Back in 2010, they also provided half-price vouchers, so it would pay for a regular taxi cab, covered half of the price. They also had a vehicle loan program. They have more stuff going on right now, but I won't try and cover that. So in 2010, we launched Door-to-Door, and Door-to-Door is a shared ride taxi program. What that means is that it's a taxi service, but not your traditional taxi service. It's not on demand. You don't just get to call and somebody comes and picks you up right away. You call, but there's a window of time where you can get a ride. That window of time currently is about 45 minutes. So you may call now and you might not be able to get a ride until 11:30. So the shared part is that theoretically and in practicality, if 2 or 3 people are moving from one part of the city or one part of the county to another, they may ride with another rider. They may not ride alone. And so that's to create efficiencies. So the door-to-door system is kind of the alternative to what you would think of in a bigger city as bus routes. So again, it's taxis, but it's provided in a different way. Back in 2010, actually in 2009, Roger Tepe, the acting director of social services, wrote a grant, 5311 grant, and that is the funding source for the door-to-door system. He wrote that grant, and one of the kind of ingenious things about it was it allowed us to use the money that we were using to run the senior center bus and our local match as a match to that grant. So it cost us no more money to launch the door-to-door system, but we were able to draw down federal funds. In 2010, we ran the program for only 5 months. I don't know if we had 1 or 2 cabs in the system. We moved about 6,000 people. A little short of that, I think it was 1 cab. But as you can see, that's a map from the very first brochure that was put out, and that red line indicates the extent of where door-to-door operated. So in 2012, 2 expansions happened. Number 1, we added the Sunshine House into our system, and number 2, we provided services in Northern Door. I don't know how well you can see it. It gets a little blurry as it gets big, but that green section up there, that was the section that was added. The reason for adding Sunshine House was twofold. There was a mutual benefit for them and for us. Roger was able to secure an ARA grant, which provided vehicles that were purchased with ARA funds that the Sunshine House could use to run their routes. For us, the benefit was we also could include their expenses inside of our system. The solid lines that are on the map are the routes that Sunshine House was running. The other thing that we did, that yellow line, is the senior center bus. So we were running routes to connect those northern and southern zones, and individuals could ride on the Sunshine House bus on any of those solid lines, all the way back in 2010, or 2012, sorry. So, and again, I'm just jumping through, not covering each year, but a few highlights. So in 2015, we did a couple of other things with our system. Sorry. Apparently, I'm a little nervous. So in 2015, we expanded service from that green zone, which was what we call south. Inside there, you can't see it very well, but right around the city is an orange zone, and that orange zone is what we call a core zone. Then we connected all of Northern Door. We did this by adding one cab into our system. So we went from, at that time, and we had steady growth and rapid growth, probably faster according to DOT than any of the other transportation systems in Wisconsin. We added the last cab, which put us up to 8 total vehicles within our system. So there was good news and bad news to that, and the way we made that work was we changed how we deployed vehicles. At one point when we were running in the north, we had one vehicle in Northern Door. That was not used much. We eventually started moving that closer and closer back to the core area. One of the other things that we did, and I would say there are multiple issues that have put us into the financial situation that we're in right now. One of those issues happened in 2015. We made a proposal to reduce ADR services so that we could use some of that money to run in the transportation system for that added cab. We didn't end up using that fund, and we ended up continuing to run the ADRC bus the same amount of hours. The other thing that was going on during this time frame is, starting in 2010, the county was receiving more money than it believed it was eligible for these programs. So we built a stockpile, and we built, or a reserve stockpile. The accountants hate when I use those kind of words. We built a reserve account, and over time, this reserve account kept growing and growing, and we were eligible to have a small reserve, but not as large as ours got. In 2013, we were given direction by the state, give us a plan for how you're going to use that reserve account. And so we did. We developed a plan in 2013, and that reserve did not get used in 13 or 14. We didn't need it. And so in 15, as we added that last vehicle, we also created a structural deficit. We knew that we were doing that, and we did it with a purpose. One was so that we could use up that reserve, because the state was kind of adamant about get this spent, or at least give us a plan for how you're going to spend it. And they allowed us to use it for operating expenses. And the other thing that we believed is, as we transitioned to a different program called Family Care, that our revenue would go up inside the system. Let's see. So in 2007 was the last expansion of service, and you can see, maybe you can see, that blue area in Southern Door. That blue area was added in 2017. Again, we didn't add any additional funds into the program. We expanded the service. Part of the reason for that is our use in Northern Door County was really small. Part of the other reason for that is the goal all along had been to create a countywide program. What we did to change the program is that anything north of the green zone or south of the green zone, we changed the time that those services were available and how they were available. So now individuals could only get a ride on those systems if they called 24 hours in advance to reserve a ride. And what that allowed us to do is put all of our cabs into the core zone and then dispatch them out, and we had more control about how we were using them, and allowed us to keep up with the capacity to cover the whole county. So that was one of the things that happened. So we did that as we got into the beginning of 17. Partially through 17, Department of Transportation contacted us again and said, you still haven't spent down all of your reserve, and we had started to use it. We used it in 15, 16, 17. But they came in and said, we're no longer willing to let you use it for operational expenses. You have to spend it before the end of the year or we're taking it back. We had a little over $80,000 left in that reserve at that time. So we purchased new vehicles for the ADRC. We were due for those anyway, so we got a new bus and a new van that we had been running there, but it drained our reserve account. In 2018, because we no longer had those funds available to use for the reserve for operations, we had to cut back services. We did not change any of the service areas, but we changed the number of hours that we provided service, and we cut 76 hours of service a week out of our system. What that means, I don't think I covered that part, we purchase door-to-door services from a company called Abbey Vans, and that purchase is on an hourly basis. So we buy the cab for an hour, and they provide the service. And we buy the cab based on the amount of money that we have in the system. We figure out how many hours we can afford, and then we work with them to figure out when and where they're going to run that service. So as of 2019, that's still what our service looks like. In 2018, again, we made those changes. Our hours of operations are the same. They're smaller than they were, but we run Monday through Sunday in the green and orange areas. And in the northern and southern areas, we only run 6 to 6, I think it is, Monday through Friday, but we don't provide service on Saturday and Sunday. So those are some of the hours that we had trimmed back in 18. Check my notes. All right. So I want to give you an idea about ridership and who's actually using this service. So we have data in the system from the beginning to now. We know who's riding. There's a software system that the company that we uses that tracks where people are picked up, where people are dropped off, and who those people are. So we pulled data from 15 through 18 and came up with some averages. We have about 1,800 unduplicated riders. What that means is that's the folks who are riding each year. It's not the same in 15 as it was in 16 or vice versa. Some people are not using it anymore and other people have jumped on and used it. But overall, it stayed pretty consistent. About 1,800 people are using that service. The average over those 4 years was 42,600 rides. In 2017, that was our peak year. And again, we hit 44,000. In 18, after we cut the hours, we dropped back down to 42,000. What was interesting about that to me is that we reduced our service, but we stayed pretty close to our average. And the reason that we did that is more and more our provider had to get more efficient. And so they were moving the same number of people, but more and more people were ending up having to share rides. So in 18, the system started moving towards what we were trying to get it to do. Again, I think one of the things that's important to know is what's the demographics of the ridership that we have. This is a public transit system. It's meant to move people who don't have other means of transportation. 50% of the individuals who rode, and this is 2018 statistics, 50% of those individuals were individuals who were identified to have a disability. 22% were individuals age 60 or over. 13% were adult riders that were under 60 but did not have a disability. So between age 21 and age 60, 7% were students and 6% were agency. And so an agency fare is something that is purchased by a managed care company, Division of Workforce Development, other entities that are buying services. Probably relevant to know in terms of fees, that 13% pay our standard fee, which is $3.50 for a ride, and individuals with a disability or over the age of 60 or students all pay half that, so $1.75 per ride. Agencies pay double that, so they're paying $7 if they're buying a ticket for someone to get a ride. I'm going to jump back because this is going to be a relevant point here, but I'm going to jump back to this map and tell you that the ridership is primarily in Sturgeon Bay. In fact, it's primarily in that core zone, that orange zone. 82% of our riders rode within that zone. 14% rode within the south zone. So the south zone is the green and the blue. Unfortunately, we don't have our vendor is not separating out those numbers, but I would tell you historically that 14% is almost all entirely in that green area. It's not that we don't have some riders in the blue area, but 14% in the green area outside the orange.
So are you saying 96% is all within the orange and the green?
Correct. 2.4% is in the pink or yellow zones. All right, sorry, I'm going to try and match up both slides here again. Okay, so I want to tell you a little bit about how the funding works. But to understand that, I think you also have to understand where the expenses come from. So ADRC running the bus is an expense that we use in the 5311 system. All of these expenses are part of what go into our grant application for the 5311. Some of them we're already paying for and doing anyway, so they allow us to draw down more funds in 5311. The ADRC bus, it's a cost that we have. It includes the driver, the substitute drivers, the gas, the maintenance, and the vehicles. Door County staff, that includes anybody that's involved in the management. It includes my time, it includes one of the staffs at the ADRC time, it includes someone in finances time. So there are other costs. Those costs are fixed costs that we have, but they allow us to draw down additional federal funds. Sunshine House costs have been part of our system. I want to reiterate, because I think there's some question about how Sunshine House ties into this, and I'll circle back to it. But there was a mutual benefit in bringing them in. The benefit for them was they got vehicles. The benefit for us is it allowed us to capture more funds to run the program. If Sunshine House ran at a deficit, we gave them some money to cover that out of the 5311 funds we received, but we were putting no local tax levy into that. And so there was, again, mutual benefit. It helped us run the taxi service. It helped them run their service. The other and the biggest expense to our system is the contract with Abbey Vans for that hourly rate for the taxi. And again, what they're covering with that hourly rate is all the operational expenses that go into it. The vehicles, the insurance, the drivers, the maintenance, all of those kind of costs. So funding. Funding comes from primarily 4 different places. The 8521 funding is state funding that we get, and again, we've gotten that for 30+ years to run the senior center bus. That money comes in. With that money, we are required to match up 20% of the funding. The funding is just short of $100,000, so the match is around 20, a little short of that. So it's a county levy that we have to put into it. But those 2 funds are the matching funds for the federal and state money, along with the fare box funds. So those revenues are what we get to use to go back to those expenses, and the difference is what we try to get back from the feds. So there are some fiscal factors that brought us here. I touched on those briefly, but I want to circle back to them. One of the issues was we developed that surplus over the first 3 years. So we weren't really using it until around 2015. We created a structural deficit by adding the cab and not reducing the ADRC hours. And by doing that, we were okay because we were using that reserve to cover that deficit. And again, thinking that our revenue would change over time. 2017, the state came in and said, you can't use that money anymore. You need to use it for capital expenses only, and you can't use it for operating expenses any longer. The last thing that happened in 2018, and again, this is, I want to be careful to say this is not an issue related to how Sunshine House is operating. It really is just an issue about how the system was set up. Sunshine House went from running at a deficit to kind of breaking even. So we didn't know that until about halfway through 2018 when we got our financial statements from them from the second quarter. When we got that, what it does is it drops down that federal money that we can draw down based on their expenses. And so that was kind of the last piece. Those other things are probably more critical, but that was the last piece for us. So before we were aware where we were at halfway through 18, we had hired a consultant. And when I say we, it really was through Dortran. Dortran wrote a grant, and they wrote a grant for Easter seals. The grant was specific to take a look at how do we do transportation across the county. All of those systems, our senior center bus, our ADRC, our ADRC bus, our door-to-door system, Sunshine House, Dortran, public taxis, how do they all work together? And what's the next step that we need to do to kind of take it to another level in terms of efficiencies and being able to run the system well? So we brought in an outside consultant firm. SRF Consulting worked on the project for several months. These are the recommendations that they came back with for us. One was governance structure. Part of that is because transportation on the county level is overseen only by the Department of Human Services committee. And there are lots of other players. Dortran has a board, Sunshine House has a board. And so there was some conversation about how do you make it a bigger process. It's not just a county system, but how do you get everybody involved in that? They also suggested we hire a full-time transportation manager. Our system had grown from 1 cab 9 years ago to 8 cabs and about $800 and some thousand. The system just grew too fast. And currently, the only one managing it is myself, and it's about a little less than 1/10 of my job. So the other was that they suggested we look at how the system is working, and we look at some redesign of connector services. I use the term remove Sunshine House. They use the term take a look at is there a different way to use it, and is there a different way to start to go with it. But from a financial point, there was not any reason any longer to keep Sunshine House in. There's no mutual benefit for either of us. The buses that we gave them are past their useful life, and the expenses that they had aren't helping us draw down any more funds. Then they also talked about seeking alternative funding, and they gave us some proposals or some ideas about how to do that. So that was kind of all happening at the same time we did the budget last year. And we came back to the board, and in the budget we asked for additional funding to hire a manager to try and figure some of this out and spend more time kind of diving into it. We went a different direction in terms of that, and we brought in a woman by the name of Gwen Larson, who also has a consulting firm. Gwen happens to be an auditor for the Federal Transportation Program. She also happens to live here when she's not working on audits across the country. So Gwen came in, and we were waiting for that SRF Consulting at the same time that we brought Gwen in, but her recommendations ultimately ended up being about the same. We need a manager, one person that oversees all of the transportation in Door County. Remove Sunshine House from the system again, that mutual benefit was gone. Continue to contract with Door to Door. So Abby Vance, and continue to contract out our taxi service was her recommendation that she initially brought to us. She also suggested that we could use the ADRC bus differently, and that we should seek new revenue sources. Her packet, or her full report, I believe, is in your packet. So I know that you've had some opportunity to read that. Probably the biggest issue within that packet was the fiscal piece. So she ran, and we asked her to provide us with a 5-year projection on what that system would cost us going forward, adding the manager but continuing to contract, running it the way we currently are. I took parts of that budget. These are just the totals. I didn't want to give you all of the detail that was in there again. But in 2020, the cost for the system would be about $973,000. That's an estimate based on the best information that we have. Our current contract with the vendor that we have is ending, and this has to go back out to bid, again, sometime this year, depending on if or how we're running the system. The important piece, I would say, to know or to notice is this is the amount of money that we would have to infuse into the system that's not currently in there for next year, the $163,600. And over the course of 5 years, that number grows, and again, that's based on a 3% increase to $213,500 over the course of 5 years, and continuing to go up as we move on. So Gwen brought that proposal and that information back to Ken and I, and we met actually several times for several hours. We talked about where do we go, what do we do? There is not that kind of money available in the human resources budget for us to be able to allocate into the transportation program. It is not a core function of the county, meaning it's not a required function. Human Services does a lot of things mostly required. County does a lot of things mostly required. This one is not a required service. So Ken's position was not different than mine in that across the county, we don't have $160,000 or $200,000 to infuse into this program. So what do? We had conversation with that list of people there, or members of those different agencies, and just to kind of let them know where we were at and look for and talk about, are there alternative ways that we can find additional funding to run this program. Currently, nobody's jumped up and said we want to give you $200,000. So basically, we then tried to put together what options do we have, and we want to propose 3 options to you today. One of the options is that we run the program in the same way that Gwen designed it, and you tell us to come up with the funding, and we figure out where that's going to come from. And when I say we, I mean mostly Ken and the guy that replaced Mark. But that would be one option. Another option is to eliminate the door-to-door system altogether. And the third option is to do a door-to-door system with a reduced number of hours. Under all 3 of those proposals, it's our recommendation that we continue to run the ADRC bus. Now, I will say that because financially, it is the easiest and makes the most sense. Financially, that program is, again, been going for 30 years, and most of that funding comes from state funding. Any way that we looked at altering how we use that, at least in the short run, doesn't give us a financial gain, and we lose the door-to-door or the senior center bus as an option. So I want to talk a little bit about the third option and what that means and what that would look like, because there are some assumptions tied to that. One of the assumptions tied to that is that we looked at how much would we have to reduce service in order to keep it going and be affordable. We currently are providing 444 hours of service a week. We would need to cut that down to 200 hours per week, which is about a 65% reduction, or it's 45% of our current system. In order to take a look at how those finances worked, we also had to take a look at a reduction in our fare box, and so we did that the same way. We reduced our fare revenue expectation by 65%. We also would suggest that if we run the door-to-door system, that we run it only inside that core zone. It's the amount of revenue we capture from the riders. So if you ride the bus, you pay $1.75. That's part of the fare box revenue. One of the other assumptions that we made is because we're suggesting that we do it only in the city, that the city contribute some funds to them. We have had conversations. We went to the city council last fall when we knew we were looking at some of these issues, and Ken and I have been invited to go back again into next week or the week after to talk with them again. Either way, we also have to find an alternative way to get some management and some tracking of services. One of the missing pieces for us since probably about 2015 is really understanding how the service works so that we can design it around need as opposed to looking at this, what I do, once or twice a year. So I want to be able to show you the fiscal impacts of the three options that we have on the table. The first line, probably easier for me to feel like I want to move, but then the mic wouldn't be on. So the first line is the system as it currently exists, and that's the $163,000 that it would cost us to run it next year if we ran it as is with the addition of a transportation manager. I want to tell you that the transportation manager addition to the local levy required is only about $30,000 to $35,000. So it's not nothing, but it's not a huge amount in order to try and oversee all of this. That being said, this is the 5-year projection of that process or that system if we ran it as suggested in Gwen's first proposal. If we remove it all together and we just run the ADRC bus, that's the additional funds we're going to have to come up with for next year. And over the course of 5 years, we're anticipating around $14,000 of additional funds. Running both, but running it at the reduced hour, which was that third option I presented to you, would cost us about $19,000 additional, $19,500 in additional funds for next year, and $47,000 for additional funds 5 years down the road. So that number would just keep going up. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we project the ridership is if we ran that system next year. So again, if we run it as is, we think we'll move another 42,600 people. That's our average over the last 4 years. If we go to the ADRC bus only, we're only running that service 35 hours a week. It does not cover most of the people that are getting moved door to door, and we'd run about 8,000 rides. We currently, and I guess I didn't say this before, I'm just thinking of it now, that 42,600 is just door-to-door rides. We've been moving about 7,000 people or 7,000 rides on the senior center bus in addition to that. So our system's probably moving closer to 50-some thousand overall, including the ADRC bus. And the third option goes back to just the taxi service itself. It doesn't include ADRC. So that ADRC part would be in there in any of the three options. But option 3 would be just the taxis themselves at 200 hours a week. And again, we just tried to do it proportionally. If we're cutting 65%, 65% of the ridership would allow us to move about 1,900 rides. Substantially less than we're currently moving. We also tried to come up with how do we know what this costs? Our anticipation is that for right around, I think it was $17,015 to be exact, would cost, that's how much it would cost to add 40 more hours into the service. So without getting too far into the fiscal part of it, that $17,000 get matched by the federal funds and by increased revenue, and that overall 40 hours would cost us closer to $64,000. The local tax levy we would need to put in would be 17. So, and with each 40 hours, again, just going proportionally, that would give us 3,800 additional rides or trips. Since I was talking to you guys at the county board level, felt like it was important to talk about if we're recommending we should do this, why are we recommending to do something that's only within the city limits or within that core zone just outside the city limits? The service is well used. We know that. It's moving a lot of people. We are able currently to leverage those expenses for things that we're already paying for in the county system. If the city took over a transportation system, they couldn't use that 120,000 we already have in the system that allows us to use match. So in our minds, that's kind of how we got to a point of recommending if we shrink it, why would we even bother to continue running it? Next steps, we're looking for some direction. We need to decide how we're going to move forward. Where it becomes a little more critical is that, again, our contract ends at the end of this year with the vendor that we currently have, so we have to rebid that contract. There are a lot of rules to follow with DOT. We need about probably 4 to 5 months minimum to do that. So we need to be doing something by August moving forward for next year. We need to decide how much money we're actually going to get put into the system, because part of the problem is if we go back to the state and we say, we're going to take it from this size to this size, they're going to reallocate the funding that's going somewhere, it's going to go somewhere else. And we can't jump back in a year and say, now we want to jump it back up. So we really need to make some decisions about how much money we're going to put in the system if we're going to run it, and how do we move forward. Then the last piece, once we make a decision, we need to do a public transportation meeting before we change the system. Obviously, there's a lot of folks interested in this, understandably, understand why, but we're required to do a different, or another one, publicized differently than we publicized this one. Because there was no decision-making that we were asking for today, it doesn't count as our actual transportation requirements. So that's all I got for you. I am certainly willing to answer questions.
We can do conversation first, or
Any questions for Joe? By the board? One moment. Vinnie.
Thank you. I have a question, if it might be for a future meeting to answer too, but other counties comparable in size, and there aren't many comparable in geography, how do they handle public transportation when there isn't a typical bus system, you know, or larger city system? Have you seen other examples?
Yeah, we've seen other examples, and our consultants have provided us with comparable models. In Wisconsin, a lot of counties that are running something, or cities, are running that shared ride taxi service, similar to what we're doing. If I'm going to be honest, 9 years ago, 7 years ago, we were probably a model for how to do it. Again, because we were capturing and using funds that we were already spending to leverage additional dollars. So, but that it's pretty typically that way, or nothing, or again, DoorTran provides some services. We have volunteer services. Some of those things are happening in other counties as well.
Thank you.
Susan.
There's obviously a lot of interest in this in the county, and I already have a lot of emails and calls about it. And one thing that some folks are saying to me is, what if you raise the prices? How much can you capture there? A second thing that people are saying is, hey, some of the places that benefit from this, like the hospital, some of the places you visited, ought to contribute something. Maybe not the 200,000, but I guess it's maybe too early, or maybe you can speculate on how much money we actually could get from the city or the hospital or the manufacturers or some of the people who benefit from people coming to them.
How about if I talk about raising the fare and I let Ken talk about the outside contributions? So we've looked at that model. We've looked at raising the fares, and that's an option for us. The fiscal piece of this, I don't want to belittle it, but it's really complicated. So the more revenue we get, the more 5311 funding we lose. So there's a cost benefit to it. I mean, you can do that. You could charge more. One of our consultants said, pretty traditionally, when you charge more for a public transit system, your revenue actually decreases the first couple of years because less people are riding it. There are all kinds of issues related to even the proposal that we are putting in front of you today. Cutting that service to 200 hours the weighting for services, obviously our volume is going to change. We can't really predict it. We did it based on a, mathematical to say if we decrease 65%, we're going to lose 65% of our ridership. It may be worse than that. I don't know. But in terms of the revenue, we can increase the cost, and I think probably over time we need to keep looking at what's the best strategy for doing that. Those changes have to be pretty incremental and pretty small. And again, probably the easiest rule of thumb is for every 46 cents we put in, we lose 50, or for every dollar we put in, we lose 54 of that federal match. So if we raised it $1 per ride, we would only gain 46 cents per ride. If that makes sense. I'll let Ken grab the outside contributors.
So the other part of the discussion is obviously outside contributions. We knew that would be a question brought up. And again, we've had meetings with multiple businesses. I guess I'm not going to point out any single one of them, but I guess the best way to answer the question is that while they see value in the system, they also, right now, the way the system is designed, that they don't feel comfortable actually contributing towards our operating cost. So there's a value to what we're providing, but again, the value is not direct in terms of the overall benefit to where they want to be able to, I guess, make donations substantially enough to offset our operating expenses. We also had meetings with, again, another question being, well, what about the community foundation or donors in that sense? Similar thing with the community foundation. Brett was very helpful in talking with us in terms of those types of opportunities. But he was very blunt in saying that the community foundation, just based off the individuals they work with, are not interested in actually funding a program that really is looking at operating expenses. You just don't have people that are interested in doing that. He says there might be someone out there, but they do not have that anywhere in the pipeline for us to consider at this point in time as far as our decision making.
I have a number of questions, but I assume since we are having a public hearing and the board will most likely be discussing this over the next month or so, I would defer my time to hear from the people in the back. I do have lots of questions, but I guess I'd like to hear what the people have to say at this point, since we're here.
I'd just like to kind of talk to the moral issue here, and the fact that for a lot of people that I personally know that use the service, some of them I've met through professional contacts, some of them I know have been clients at one time or another of Human Services, and I just would like, and I guess Joe, I know this probably bothers you as much, but it's really very conflicting to want to advocate for people and provide for people, and then at the same time look at the fiscal end of it and what we need to do fiscally as a county. And I just wanted to address that because I want everyone to know that this is not an easy decision for any of us that have been involved with Human Services over the years.
Two quick things. Friday I got a phone call from someone who I know uses door-to-door to get to and from work. And one of the big questions I asked him, he doesn't want to see the program end, was since he crosses one of the lines, what the difference in price would be if he had to take a taxi. Using door-to-door, each way cost him $3.25. Taking a taxi, on the other hand, would cost him about $30 each way to and from work. So in the case of just getting to work and being able to hold down a job, he would have to quit his job if the program ended. Yes?
How many miles is that person going to and from work?
That, I'm not sure how many miles he's actually going, but he is crossing from one section to another section.
Please, no comments from the back yet. We can't get it on tape.
I'm just asking that because of the cost you're saying, $30 each way.
Okay. Go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to say is most of the board and some of the community knows I have a child with special needs. Realistically, he will not have a license. And a lot of his classmates and friends also will not have a license. His peers, the ones that will be able to live either independently or somewhat independently, will need a way to get to and from things like the grocery store or a job or anything like that, where not having some kind of a system to transfer them to where they need to go is going to just be hard for them if they don't have family that can drive them wherever they need to. That's it.
Bob?
A hypothetical question. If the residents of this county wanted this service and wanted us to pay for it, are we even able to raise the taxes based on our levy limits imposed by the state? Or are we still hamstringed by that fact?
So there's the only way, well, again, yes, the levy limits are imposed upon us, so that is correct. We either have to, if we want to maintain a system, we'll have to find the funding elsewhere, in other words, internal cuts. Or ultimately, I know it's been brought up several times, is you could do a referendum, but that's also a process you got to go through in terms of doing the notice, doing the vote, and so, but that is another option. Just want to throw it out there, but a referendum would not be able to be done in terms of us making that type of decision and going forward with doing the RFP to move forward. So this, the timing doesn't work.
Thank you.
No questions from the public. This is for the supervisors at the moment. Sorry.
If you don't mind, this is one of those ones, I know both Joe and I think we can honestly say we have been hours and hours, and I can honestly say I know there's been sleepless nights for us, so I know all the individuals in the back are all going to have their own individual stories of the value of the system, and we totally understand that. But this is also one of those things where, unfortunately, where we've done something, I guess in hindsight, where we got involved in something that we didn't have to get involved, and now we're providing a service that we're now considering having to pull back. So this is one of those things where maybe sometimes the hindsight, you think you're doing something right, but what you do is you build a dependency on something, and now we're in a spot where financially, due to the state law with the levy limits and stuff like that, we're really against the wall in terms of what we want to do. So, you know, from all the people in the back, you can share your stories. I think we all understand the impact of the program, and I guess we fully understand the value of it. So for us, I think we feel this is bad in terms of where we are today and what we're trying to accomplish. That being said, though, you know, from a financial standpoint, when you're looking at that type of annual cost that we have to account for maintaining the service, this with the levy limits, I can tell you that right now we are not able to sustain that. Again, we can do it, but then we have to find cuts in other areas, and then you're going to have the same thing whether, just pick a department, right? Unless it's anything that deals with the public, you have those same individuals telling a story of why human services are needed, or why public health is needed, or why we need to have this department, or why we need to keep our roads plowed. So this recall, I mean, why we hear all the stories of this impact, we have to make cuts in other areas, you're going to hear those same stories. So again, we're kind of one of those things where it's a very tough decision. So when we went through this, I can tell you originally, we wanted to put the notice out there because we knew the impact of what we're recommending. Our first cut, honestly, was to say that we really should get out of the transportation business. It's not part of our core function. We had a hard time sleeping with that, and we understood making that recommendation would be very hard even for you to consider, even just based off the ridership and the impact it has in the community. So that's why we did everything we could just to put together that middle option. And that middle option, in essence, we're still contributing what we kind of are. We're going to put in I guess, some additional funding from the county, what we think we can sustain. We're hoping that our discussions with the city, if they can see the value of the program, that they would, I guess, that $20,000 in our initial discussions with the city, they thought that would be something that would be palatable to the city council. We don't know that. But that's where, I guess, that additional funding, we're hoping that the city will become a partner. Even with that, I can tell you I have concerns with that recommendation just because that does not have a built-in manager. So between now and, if you guys give us guidance, between now and April, I have to come up with a solution of how we're actually going to manage this, because you just can't say, let's just fund it and it's going to run right. I think that's one of the things we've learned over the past 5 years, is you really need to have someone, in this case, if we scale it back, a part-time position, that's actually looking at your ridership. Where are they going? Where is the performance? Are we duplicating stuff? Are we competing with Dortran? So we need to have that type of resource there. So again, even the recommendation of this midpoint, I guess I even have concerns, but I'm trying to find some middle ground to where we can provide some core service to the residents of the county, but also, I guess fiscally, put us in a position where it's a little bit more sustainable. So just to give context for the people in the audience, I understand you're going to say your statements about how important it is. I totally get it. I think Joel and I totally get it, but it's kind of where we're at. So I just want to give context for the county board.
Thank you. David?
A couple of questions. One of them is, how did that fee get, how did they arrive at the fee that they have? I know what it costs to operate my vehicles. I have a concept of what taxi services cost.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I wasn't involved in the transportation program when that first got set up. We did raise the fees once since I've been managing it. That being said, I think probably some market research. I mean, I'm guessing here, probably some market research in terms of what's it cost to ride other shared ride taxis in Wisconsin or across the country, and kind of a cost-benefit analysis of, again, it's a public transit system, so it's supposed to be moving people who are not able to afford their own vehicles, and so it's at a reduced cost. But I'm assuming that it was just some market research in terms of what other things were happening.
And does that fee get you potentially from one end of the county to the other?
There's a fee structure, which is, there's a door-to-door website, and there's a map on there with a very detailed explanation of the fee structure. The zones or the colors, if you cross those zones, it's a $5 fee to cross the zone. So even if you live on the opposite line of one and you move from one to the other only a mile, if you happen to be unfortunate enough to live across that zone, it's going to cost you an extra $5, and then each zone that you cross has got an added fee.
So it's a fee within the zone and then a transition from zone to zone.
That's correct.
Fee. And that would be same in reverse coming back.
Correct.
So you're in Sister Bay traveling to Sturgeon Bay for a medical event and then Sturgeon Bay back to Sister
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't remember offhand what those prices are, but they're pretty clearly delineated in that website.
And then on page 11 of your information, which is page 70 of our packet, the Dortran Volunteer Driver Program, and then I see a cost per passenger of $42.87. I'm confused at how something that's labeled voluntary is priced considerably higher.
That's a great question, and that report came from Gwen. I'd have to go back and take a look at it and take a look at the information. I think they're pricing that out based on an estimated cost of the drivers, but they're also looking at the mileage, because I'm assuming that they're paying those volunteers some mileage.
So, but they are volunteer drivers, as the title says.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Bob, did you have something?
Just a question. What is the most effective pathway for a concerned citizen to help in this process? Which committees to come and report to, or which individuals to talk to?
So I guess the best answer is, again, is that right now transportation is underneath the, I guess, direct responsibility of the Human Services Board. I guess the recommendation is that by the bus, I guess, fits well within the ADRC, and under Joe's jurisdiction, the transportation does not fit well within Human Services. So I guess if they really want to get involved or try to have contacts, I'd have them work directly with myself, please, because we're actually trying to, I guess, extract transportation out of Human Services.
Thank you.
Susan?
I guess I want to make an editorial comment and to the folks in the back. I'm very supportive of this system, and this is a hard thing for everybody. But this levy limit thing drives us all crazy on this board. And what that says is there's not even a cost of living increase, okay? So year to year, we can't go above. And every time we raise it with a legislator in Madison, what they say to us is, yeah, but it's not likely to change because the public doesn't want it. And what I'm saying is, if the local citizens would like us to have some more discretion about these programs that we're not mandated to do, they need to let these folks know that it's not appropriate to say to your local governments, you have to do everything by levy limit, except you can't raise it as costs go up. And, you know, our people like to get raises, our employees, so they could really help as citizens by saying to the legislators, this doesn't even make any sense. You have got to give some relief to local municipalities and governments.
Just one more comment to this. I want to make sure we get comments from the public, but also trying to answer some questions so that way you feel comfortable. I know I've gotten several calls from individuals in terms of the county purchase of the former Yonkers building, and how can we find money for that versus paying for transportation. And again, just as Susie's brought up, I guess there's two ways to look at how the county operates. It's money that we have for, I guess, what we consider one-time expenses that we can do, but then there's also what you consider the long-term operating expenses. So again, why you think that may, or depending on what you think about the building, it was a strategic location. The county board made a decision to move forward with that. We used a one-time acquisition for that, and that's completed. What we're talking about here is what Susie's brought up, is we're looking at operating expenses that goes into our operating budget that has an impact, what we call the levy limit. So the best way to think about it is that if we're allowed to spend $1 million this year, I'm only allowed to spend $1 million next year, plus our net new construction, which for Door County has been under 1%. So just to keep it really simple, last year we only grew about $200,000 in terms of our new ability as far as our spending. Just between utilities and our payroll, I'm probably about $150,000 in debt just by the time we adopt the budget. So just to give context of the different way of spending, and again, the county is very, I consider very frugal in terms of how we manage our money and how we manage our cash. But I just want to make sure that people understand that there's a difference between a capital expense, which is a one-time expense, and again, I know there's operating costs to maintain the building, but that's entirely different than what we're talking about, the transportation program and how it impacts us. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, I do want to open it up for public comment. So what I'd like you to do is limit yourself to 3 minutes. You can come up and approach the microphone, introduce yourself, and would somebody please turn the lights on in the back? We want to see all your smiling faces. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is John Wolf. Anybody that's taking notes, it's JONWOLFE. I live in Sturgeon Bay, 326 Georgia Street. My wife and I have 3 adult children, 2 of which have severe mental health issues, 28-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son, who use door-to-door on a pretty much a daily basis to get to places where they need to go. In the case of our 28-year-old daughter, she does not have a driver's license and realistically probably will not get a driver's license, at least not for the foreseeable future, if ever. I would implore the county board to do the right thing morally, and I would say, I understand everything that's been said about the fiscal part of it, and the numbers and the equations and everything else and getting the money. I would say, if you find as a board that it is not sustainable in the current format, which it does not appear to be, then I would encourage you to take a very hard look at that option of reducing the hours, at least. Because I know for the sake of our family, I can say that even if it's 50% less hours or 60% or 65% less hours, it's better than no hours at all. And putting our adult children who have no other viable means of transportation in a very difficult position in terms of getting to work, in terms of buying their groceries, and just their daily needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Thomas Sim. I live in West Jacksonport, and I can't drive due to medical condition. And let me just. Of course, this got mixed up. Oh, I got it. Actually, I took a door-to-door taxi ride here from my house in West Jacksonport. My name is Thomas Sim, and I am legally disabled. I have been since I was 1.5 years. When I had my first seizure, A week later, I had my first asthma attack. I almost died several times when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was also diagnosed with neurofibromatosis, which causes growth inside or outside the body. When I was 17, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor on my brainstem. When I was 19, I was only given 3 months. I just turned 43 in November. Then in 2013, there was a growth in my pancreas. I wound up having to have a Whipple that left me with a 13-inch scar. A month later, I was back in the hospital with septicemia. Later that year, a growth of my thyroid and neck were removed. I've had my appendix, gallbladder, part of my pancreas, and small intestines removed, along with a condition in my feet, which makes it hard for me to get around. There are people who have it worse than me. Door-to-door doesn't only provide rides, but the feeling of being independent, not dependent. I volunteered 2 days at the Boys and Girls Club. I love helping children, and I help helping children, some of which may be related to you. I started a petition yesterday, and in a matter of hours, I got over 70 signatures. I'd like to have a copy of that. Some of which are doctors, nurses, and business owners. I will not stop at 70. If I do 70 in a matter of hours, just think of what I can do in days or weeks. 1,000 signatures is not that unreasonable. Everyone I have talked to thinks this is a disgrace that this is even a subject. I have more people waiting to sign as soon as possible. I'm standing here on a bad leg, mind you, to stick up for everyone who can't stand up for themselves. If you're looking to cut costs somewhere, do it somewhere else. I don't know when re-election is, but I've decided I want to run since I have 71 signatures, and from where I stand, those are as good as votes. And also I want to go on to saying that this is my, this is my, what I got so far for signatures. I don't know if you want to see that, but you can have that. Oops, and there's more. So everyone who I have talked to thinks that this is not a good thing, and actually I live in West Jacksonport, so I just can't get a cab in Sturgeon Bay or hail a cab, and I have a mother who's ill, and my stepfather works all day, so he can't just cart me around all day. And with door-to-door, it made me feel more like I'm not an adult, but I'm more independent, and I don't have to ask anybody for anything. And they've always been there. All the drivers have always been very nice, very courteous. I've never been late once to any of my appointments, and to take this away would be a big mistake for a lot of people, because like I said earlier, there are people who are worse off than me, who can't walk or who can't talk, or have other disabilities where they can't, or big wheelchairs they need to be lugged around, and people don't have those kind of vehicles, and to take that away from them, it's just not right. So I hope you make the right decision. Thank you. And also, I don't know if he's still here, but I know Mike Serpy, and I talked to him, and he told me I should speak with Joe Krebsbach too about this, and have him look at that list. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is part of it. Whoops.
Did you want to speak?
Okay. Boy, you guys got a tough decision. Hey, first of all, I have to get credibility.
What's your name?
My name is Paul Futner.
Thank you.
Paul Futner. I usually speak pretty loud. I live up on Old Sage Road, Sister Bay. And I want to establish two things. One, my credibility in speaking for older people. I'm 86, and I volunteer for Door Train, neighbor to neighbor. And we got a lot of old people. Some still live in their home and pay taxes. Isn't that amazing? And when you think about it, old people in this generation are being treated a little bit different than they did in the old generation where family took care of them. You have to remember, old people hate to ask for help. They're very proud. And they need help. And this is rather unique because your county, 1/3 of the population is over 55. That's public information. And so there's a need, all right? And that needs to be discussed and resolved because we are very unique in this county, as you all know. One, the shape of the county, the influx of tourists that brings a lot more people in. So there's a real, to me, there's a responsibility to people that need to go to dialysis, hospitals, eye doctors, you name it. Some just need a ride just to get outside. Okay, I'm talking for old people in the Door County area. Now, the other area I want to talk about, in 1961, I started from scratch an engineering company. And we sold it in 2012. We had 16 employees, and we were doing $80 million a year annually with no salespeople. Currently, I'm consulting for a company out of India, and prior to that, for Ford Motor Company. I want to establish some credibility about business. I listened to your program today, and I think it sucks. All the programs you're in aren't going to work. And I say that with conviction. When I listen to everything you're going through, this is so typical. When I served on the village board or when I worked with other companies, it's amazing how our focus becomes money and how to use it instead of end result, helping the people we should be helping. How do we do that? You aren't going to do it, what I heard. You got to think outside the box. You got to take a clean piece of paper and start thinking, what are the priorities and how are you going to make it work? And if you think hard enough, you can do it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Vicki from Joliet Avenue. This may be a dumb question, but I understand the money situation, and I was just wondering why Yonkers would be so important to fund instead of the transportation, which is so much needed. Can you answer that?
Again, I tried to address that before. The Yonkers is a one-time capital expense. So it's handled fiscally in our books, different than it is as far as the operating costs moving forward with the transportation program. So it's not the same expenses.
Margie Hadala with Doula Givers of Door County, Wisconsin. I'm an elder care and end-of-life doula, and in one of my roles in that is to help the aging population to establish an aging well life plan. And that focuses primarily on picking a residence that they will be able to age in place and remain in their own home. But it also includes making sure that there's public transportation. And we have been advising people for years to make sure that they're within your service areas for this service. It's really critical to keep our seniors in their own homes or apartments or whatever, and allow them the autonomy and independence that they need. And it also doesn't just relate to Sturgeon Bay. This is where all the services are, and those people in the rural areas and in the Northern Door need to be able to access our services as well. So I really appreciate the full report that you gave, and I hear all of what you have said, but please make sure that the service continues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy Brown, Sturgeon Bay. The League of Women Voters of Door County recognizes the need and supports the continuation of a transportation system in Door County that is affordable to the residents who use it, as you've enumerated already. That all helps them to maintain that independent living, which we all desire. We understand the county's budget limitations. There are always hard decisions to make during budget cycles. However, we would encourage the public, private, and nonprofit sectors of Door County to come together to fund an affordable solution to continuing door-to-door rides for the many people it serves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Megley. I live in Sturgeon Bay. And as you can see, I am in a wheelchair, which limits my ability to get from one place to another. As far as transportation goes, I have used door-to-door for years now to get to my medical appointments. And if you cancel door-to-door, I don't know what that's going to do for my health. I don't know how I will get, well, I can use choice mobility, but the cost is more expensive. And I don't know what that will do for my budget. It is going to be far more expensive for me to have to use that transportation. And for many people who are on fixed budgets, it's going to be far more expensive for them and far harder for them to do those medical expenses, get groceries, do the things they need to do. So I beg you, I beg you, I beg you, do not cancel door-to-door. It is a very important service that we are receiving and a much-needed service. So please do not cancel them.
Thank you.
Good morning again. Don Fricks from Fish Creek. I have some experience with the State Department of Transportation, Board of Aeronautics. I volunteered with the small airport in the county on the board of the airport commission for the town of Gibraltar and Ephraim for 18 years. Understanding the Sturgeon Bay Airport and the limitations of uses for federal money that comes in and the limitations on what you can charge for county provided services like hangar leases and things like that. I'm wondering, I'm understanding that the county is upwards of $150,000 a year to subsidize the operation of the airport. We were one of 5 airports in the state that consistently was in the black and was completely off the taxpayers' property tax to support the small airport up there. It's a different thing, but I'm wondering, as a suggestion, if there's a way to get our legislatures to allow increases in the fees charged for airport services for people who, you know, are paying $4 to $7 a gallon for gas and can afford a hangar and afford avoiding our beautiful roads in the state and flying, you know, that there's some way to convince our legislators to be able to allow us to shift some costs from those kind of operations to operations that are needed by regular people. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Cindy Germain here in Sturgeon Bay. I want to come from 2 different organization perspectives. I'm a care manager for Care Wisconsin, and we are part of a larger initiative here in Wisconsin to bring people who are differently abled into the workforce. It would be difficult to do that here without some kind of consistent transportation, and Door County would then lose some able workforce, additional workforce, which we so much need. I'm also the director for Active Seniors Options. That's a nonprofit that works on aging issues with research, education, and services. And I have just a thought of, you know, we're all aging. And this is not just a 5-year issue. This is a many-year issue, and it's a whole county issue. It's not just transportation within the city limits. And so we need to take in consideration that there's a longer game here than just 5 years, and we should look at a longer solutions than just what are we funding in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Heinke. I'm actually a resident of Outagamie County. I own Door County Cab and One Awesome Cab, and also Packerland Shuttle. I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned a cheese factory, a couple resorts, restaurants, construction company, done a lot of things, made and lost a lot of money. But one of the things when I came up here, 5 years ago, I started One Awesome Cab with one cab. Now I have 9. And I by mistake, or by happen chance, I started a cab up in Fish Creek about 3-4 years ago. And it grew into purchasing Door County Cab. And one of the things when I got up there, as a child, I think the only thing my experience of Door County was going fishing at Bailey's Harbor at the yacht club off the pier in the spring. I never got to know Door County, but you've got a phenomenal thing up here for business. Another county your size that I've done business in, 2 of them, O'Connell County and Marinette, are pretty poor. They don't have anywhere near the services you guys have here. I work a lot with Care Wisconsin and Lakeland Care and a few other companies. And you definitely have a huge need up here for the elderly, for handicapped and special needs. And a lot of people say, oh, doesn't door-to-door hurt you with their low fares? And I have to explain to them there's no way that I could handle all that business anyways. And there's a huge need for a system like either door-to-door or something similar. And I've gone through a lot of things that you're doing, and I had a few questions I wanted to ask, but apparently I wasn't able to. And I've had some solutions for your problems. But I was approached this, about 2 months ago by a gentleman that's starting a I don't want to divulge what he's doing, but he's supplying rooms for workers up near in the middle of the northern door. And I've got a proposal for him to have a shuttle service for those workers between the Egg Harbor area, Jacksonport, and those areas. And in that, I looked at, for me to service northern Door County, being it's so expansive, is very difficult. And I almost had a permanent cab company through the winter up in Sister Bay until they decided to bring in Uber and Lyft. And I met with a lady there at the, I can't remember what her name is, but it would have worked. And I mean, you need the service. You need a transportation service, whether it's public or private, in Door County, because of the age of the people and because of the handicapped people and just low income, some of the low income people that need it to work. But what happened is all of a sudden you bring in Uber and Lyft, and they take the cream of the crop. So the hours that we run 24 hours, and just to let you know, it's hard to find good drivers. And I work between 110 and 120 hour weeks. I had a couple sick drivers and I worked 2 days straight in my cab, slept in my cab because, and you can ask the people from Lakeland Care and Care Wisconsin, there's very rarely that we can't take care of the people because of what we do. But you guys have a tough decision. Money's always an issue. If everybody had enough, they'd do whatever they want. But I think between the private sector and what you guys have for your government money available, and I apologize, I'm terrible with names, the gentleman in the purple shirt, I can remember shirts, but if you're able to use those funds in certain ways, I'm a problem solver. I'm an entrepreneur. I can figure it out. If I can figure out, and my goal is to have a shuttle service from Washington Island down to the airport. And including, and I've already got the plan figured out, and it includes Algoma and Kewaunee. The thing of it is when you start putting in government regulations and funding this company or doing that, you take the private sector out of the picture, and you can't. I'm not competing against Door County, so don't get me wrong. Door to door. Door to door is a great. They do a great service here. You can offer 3 things, and you can either offer price, speed, or quality. And the only thing that door to door can't do is speed. If somebody needs to get to an appointment right now, they don't call door to door, they call us. So we fill that niche. And so there's a lot of little issues that you can do, and this seems like a huge problem, funding, but I see that, I mean, and it does depend on where you can use your funds. If you can't use your funds for operational stuff, it creates a problem for certain, especially for government issues. Whereas private people, I can take profit from one part of my business, because the tourist trade up here is huge. And you guys got a continuous problem, people going out. I mean, if the police really wanted to bust, if you want to make money, just have cop arrest drunk drivers. There's so many people that drive drunk up in Northern Door because there's no transportation.
Can you please limit your comments to the transportation
I'm
issue?
sorry.
You have
I'm just saying,
several
what I'm
people to
saying
talk
is
yet.
there's a huge need for transportation because of the industry you have through April through October, getting people from resort to resort and things they want to do. So that combined with everything else, I think the problem is solvable. You might not be able to spend as much money or want to spend as much money, but there are a lot of ways you can do it. So, but I think door-to-door is a good system.
Thank you. I would remind everybody, we're trying to keep it to about 3 minutes per speaker, but go ahead.
I've been a rider with...
What's your name?
Don Fisher.
Okay, thank you.
I've been riding door-to-door since they started. Sure. And to me, just the tremendous growth shows the need. There's no, I don't think anybody can deny that. I heard earlier that something about one of the things that ties the city's hands is that public transportation is not a core issue or mandated or whatever word you used, I forget. Maybe it should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Pam Bush, 351 North Forestville Avenue, Sturgeon Bay. I'm speaking today as the Mobility Manager for DoorTran. Thank you for your support of public transportation since August of 2010. Door-to-door rides is the largest transportation system in Door County and has increased from 6,000 to almost 43,000 rides in 9 years, which speaks to the increased need for this service. I had rider data, which Joe covered for us. However, I do want to point out 9% of those rides require wheelchair access. Where did people need to go? Medical services, employment, shopping, and socialization. Door-to-door is keeping everyone involved in our community. Over 5% of rides were also to county services, the Justice Center, the ADRC, the Government Center, City Hall. Please consider these national facts. Every $1 invested in public transportation generates $4 in economic returns. Over half of public transit trips are for employment. 71% of funding for public transportation flows to the private sector, creating and supporting jobs. Home values perform 42% better when located near public transit. Possible opportunities. Governor Evers' proposed budget includes a significant increase to 8521 and 8520 state funds. If approved, this could contribute to the county's local match for door-to-door rides. The proposed budget also may allow counties to increase tax levy for transportation services. Perhaps the city and county can contribute to the local match in addition to businesses or medical facilities. Can room tax revenue be used for transportation since tourists and service workers are using this system? Some considerations and questions that I'll leave you with. As an aging community and one of the oldest counties in the state, the demand for this service will continue to increase. How will we keep our aging residents independent and involved? How will some riders continue to get to and from work? If people can't get to work, what will employers do who are already struggling? If public transit funding is given up and door-to-door ends, how will we ever get back to offering the service again? Will this also mean that the ADRC bus will be required to return to serving only individuals 55 or more or with a disability? If 5% of the rides are for people to receive county services, what will the county be responsible for when the person can't get to these services? Again, thank you for supporting door-to-door rides. I look forward to your decision, and I am hopeful that you will support the system ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Amy Conley, I live in Sturgeon Bay. I'm here today as the Executive Director of the United Way of Door County. One of the many things that United Way does is we assess the community needs and then work with the members of the community to create solutions to address these needs. The needs assessments that we completed in 2005 and 2006 showed us that once again, transportation was a huge concern for many in our community. In the spring of 2007, we gathered a group of community members together from nonprofits, for-profit businesses, and government bodies to start working on a solution. About the same time, the Door County Community Foundation offered their first impact grant of $25,000. The group at that time, called the Transportation Consortium, applied. We went in for an interview, and at that time we had a lot of ideas and no solid plans. They decided to grant us the $25,000. One of the members said, "Build it, they will come." The numbers you saw today proved people will come and use transportation. With this $25,000, we were able to contract with Pam Bush, who you just heard from, and begin moving things forward. After a few years, the Transportation Consortium turned into DoorTran, a standalone nonprofit organization. DoorTran and the community have done many things to make transportation more affordable and more accessible in Door County since this time. However, today I'm here to talk to you specifically about door-to-door rides. Prior to the county launching this program in 2010, a taxi ride cost approximately $15 for a rider to travel within the city of Sturgeon Bay. A taxi outside of Sturgeon Bay, due to cost, that wasn't an option for many people who needed a ride. DoorTran was an advocate for public transit and encouraged the county to launch door-to-door rides in 2010. The number of rides given and the number of Door County residents who are now able to get where they need to go is impressive, and every year I continue to be amazed by that number. Creating a shared ride taxi program such as door-to-door was not an easy task. Hundreds of hours of time from community members and county employees went into creating the system, writing the grants to fund the system, and then securing a provider for the system. Each year the system is analyzed and tweaked. Every few years the grant has to be rewritten and a provider needs to be secured. United Way is grateful for the people who work to keep door-to-door rides as part of the county's public transportation system. Despite the work that door-to-door rides and DoorTran are doing, United Way continues to hear that there are not enough transportation options in Door County. DoorTran continues to work to provide more resources and options. If door-to-door rides would cease to exist, this need would increase considerably. Concerned citizens, nonprofit organizations, business owners, and government representatives will need to work to create other options. I'm all about hard work and creative solutions. However, since we have a solution that works, door-to-door rides, let's work to keep this option. If we put time and energy into creating solutions to keep door-to-door rides a transportation option in our county, we can all win. United Way is willing to be part of a group to work on creating solutions to keep door-to-door rides. That would include funding options. That would also include figuring out how we can have a transportation manager. As a board member for DoorTran, I can also assure you that DoorTran is willing to work to keep door-to-door rides in the county. At this time, I want to make this a little more personal. In 2005, my 82-year-old grandmother was living on her own, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, as most farm families do. She lived 7 miles outside of Green Bay with no transportation options. Her children, my parents, knew that she shouldn't be driving anymore, but there weren't any options, and none of them were able to drive them around, as they were all still working. She was fiercely independent. She loved to be on the go. She had her cards, her bowling, her lunch groups, her dinner groups, so she kept driving, and none of us were willing to take her driver's license away. One Friday morning on her way to her weekly hair appointment, she ran a stop sign. She got in an accident. She seriously injured the driver, and she passed immediately. This is why creating transportation solutions is so important to me and so necessary to our Door County community. I don't want another family to go through what our family did. Please work to keep door-to-door rides as a viable transportation option for Door County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seth Wiederanders, 609 North 12th Avenue. I'm here on behalf of Jack's Place, which is located at 1623 Rhode Island in our city. Jack's Place is unfortunately not centrally located. Many of our participants are relying on door-to-door to get them to Jack's for services and support that they need. The 400 rides to and from Jack's Place by door-to-door per month. I just got that number from the boss. We now have, as a city and a county, we have a completed housing study, which is great. And then the word in that study was we need affordable housing. We also need to continue to support affordable transportation. And I think door-to-door, it has done a really good job at that. In the last 9 years, we've seen Jack's Place people use it every day we're open, 400 rides a month. So, I think we need to look at how important affordable transportation is in our county, and I'm hoping we can do something as a city too, since door-to-door is a big thing in our city here. We need to get people to where they gotta go. And if you can't afford a cab ride, it's gonna fall on human services, and it's gonna fall on caregivers, and I would just like to see door-to-door continue.
Thank you.
Christy Weber, Sturgeon Bay. I just wanted to add in, because I didn't hear anybody say it, that you had offered out a referendum. And, before cutting a program, that's a simple thing to do. And if you can raise the revenues, which seem minuscule compared to buying a building and then maintaining it forever and heating it and providing programs for that building and prioritizing one program over another as far as where our long-term dollars go, let us, at least as a community, countywide, say whether or not our seniors' ability to fend for themselves is a high priority to everyone. See if our handicapped and our less fortunate who can't afford taxi rides aren't our priority as an entire county, and whether or not we as a county will respect them and not be elitists by saying that that's the program that should go. And I really, really urge every one of you to know that there might only be 10 people in Fish Creek, but there's only, using that service, but there's only a few hundred that live there. Percentage-wise, that's a huge percentage of the population. And if you're going to play percentages against Sturgeon Bay as the only community asked to participate, I would say they also provide the most services to the community, and they are part of the county already. Sturgeon Bay is paying in already, and isolating them out for an additional charge is just wrong, because they're paying you. They're paying for that service already. They also house most of our poor, most of our handicapped, and most of our elderly that we care about deeply here. So when we look at the county aging, all of us aging, and staying in our homes, that one person in Egg Harbor shouldn't take an entire community and say, well, that's not our problem then. If we have one person in every community, that service is a humanitarian service. And I know we started that program on a humanitarian basis. I know this county, hands down, will vote either all of you out if you don't keep the service, or they'll vote for a referendum to keep it operating and expand it. Transportation is an unusual thing here, and you may not have that as your charge, but the voters will pick what you prioritize. in the future. And if you do not prioritize this, you aren't representing this county, I know it, because we would definitely care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Erin Sokola. I'm a social worker at Door County Medical Center. And today I'm here representing both our organization and also the patients that we serve, many of whom are not able to make their own voices heard. Since 2010, Door to Door has been a lifeline for Door County residents without access to alternate transportation. The addition of a shared ride taxi service with affordable fees opened up a wealth of opportunities for those who are unable to drive, don't have reliable vehicles, or have specialized care needs. As we know, first and foremost, Door to Door provides individuals with access to health care, as their vans give rides to and from the Door County Medical Center clinics, urgent care, emergency room, hospital, and rehab facilities multiple times every day. But in addition to connecting individuals to necessary medical care, Door to Door provides people with access to employment, social, religious activities, and daily needs activities that enable them to support themselves and maintain a high quality of life. Door to Door is an aging community, or I'm sorry, Door County is an aging community. Stories like the ones we've heard here today will expand manyfold in the years ahead. For the vast majority of us, there will come a time when we will need to retire from driving. Not all of us will be fortunate enough to have family or friends available to fill our transportation need. Many of us will not be in a position to afford the cost of unsubsidized private transportation. And most of us will not want to be dependent on our loved ones to get where we need to go. Public transportation is crucial for a healthy and vibrant community and is vital to the independence and well-being of our citizens. Without affordable public transportation such as Door to Door and the ADRC bus, many of us will find ourselves stranded without a way to get where we need to go. The dissolution of Door to Door rides will create a dire situation for many Door County residents and leave a tremendous gap in the network of transportation options currently available. The other resources, although wonderful and necessary, will not be able to fill this void. We live in a community filled with individuals who have the skills, dedication, and expertise to find creative solutions to difficult problems. Many of these people have recently engaged in an extensive project through DoorTran to search for ways to optimize and potentially expand the transportation options available in our community. We also have many community members who excel at accessing funding, both formal and informal, to meet a community need. It is our hope that you will renew your commitment to this vital service and actively enlist the community in ensuring that it remains a viable and sustainable resource for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask how many more people would like to speak on transportation? Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll start back at 12:30.